Get that double E degree for nothing.
Okay, you ready for a roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Jacobs.
Here.
Committeeman Hickey.
Here.
Mr. Stratfoss.
Here. He's here too.
He is here, Mr. Rodelius.
He
is. Mr. Leonard.
I'm here.
Mr. DeGiovanni.
Here.
Mr. Zupnik.
Present.
Ms. Arabana.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
I am here.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Here.
Mr. Rodelius.
Here.
Mr. Travelini called me. He's going to be running a few minutes late. He will be showing up shortly. Just has to drop something off at his house.
Okay.
Open public meeting. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 16, 2020.
Please stand for the flag salute.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I don't see any minutes or any resolutions. And are you standing in for Paul tonight, Joe?
I wish.
You wish.
Paul is excused for tonight.
Yes, I know he is excused, but we have a determination of completeness. So, are we going to talk about that, discuss that, Janine, or?
Well, USCT, he deemed complete, and they're tentatively being scheduled for March 5th. They were just getting back to us. It looks like it should be no problem. So we'll have USCT on March 5th and Elite on March 12th.
Okay. We don't have to do anything with that, right? Just
No.
schedule the meeting, that's it?
That's true.
Yeah,
And,
Right.
okay.
They have to still send in their copies, and they have to send out their notices, which they
Right.
will be doing.
Mhm, okay.
But we have time.
And Madam Chairman, we'll just confirm for the record that a new member has been appointed by the mayor. Tim Waters has been appointed and will serve and sign his written oath of office.
Okay. Welcome, Tim. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll open it up to the public. If there's any comments that are not on the agenda.
Well, here's a surprise. Hi, Brian.
Good evening. Brian Haggerty, Fairview Drive. This might be a planner question.
Oh. That's what we get.
Okay, so I've been trying to figure out this third round and what it means, and the subcommittee stuff and all the rest of that stuff. And I did another amendment to the map that Mr. Collins and I did wrong twice now. Mr. Collins may have dabbled in that. Let's go. E2, family units. The 28 required is actually family units, not low and moderate income. So only the
No.
family units count.
Brian, when you say family,
That's what it says.
I understand. But the only family that you regulate in law and in Mount Laurel is family low and affordable versus age-restricted affordable.
Okay.
So family means affordable. It just, there's too many words, so we get into these basic
Okay.
categories, and one category is family affordable, another category is age-restricted affordable.
So that's the question I had is, are one-bedroom and efficiencies counted
Yeah.
for this 28?
Yes, one bed, you have to still have a mix.
There's a required distribution
Right.
that has a certain number of a minimum number of 3 bedrooms, which is 20%.
Right.
A maximum number of 1 bedrooms, which is 20%. And the
A
balance,
minimum 2 and 30, and then you can,
then you can balance
Well,
out
that's
the rest.
it, right.
As long as you provide those 3 bedrooms.
but those one-bedroom maximum of, one-bedroom efficiencies, maximum of 20, that does count toward the 28, toward the family unit?
Yes, but it's not efficiencies, they're 1-bedroom units, which means that they have a bedroom and a balance of a dwelling unit.
Okay.
But yes, there's a
So that's
required mix
clear.
of
Yeah,
1.
it doesn't matter,
I
it doesn't matter if one
okay.
person lives in it, it's still, as long as it's not restricted to by age, A one-bedroom
So-
is a one-bedroom affordable unit is a family unit.
Cool,
Okay.
okay. So that is just the distinction between, I
That's
couldn't find the
that's-
definition, okay.
I know, and then another thing to know is group homes don't quite fit into age restricted or family, so you still have to get your family units, even if you have group homes.
Okay. Okay, so we still have, that's good, because that's still at 167 and not some.
That's right,
Higher
not
numbers.
280.
Yeah, yeah.
But
okay.
don't worry about that.
That's good. But it still opens the question of, in that E.2, it does say, it still does say rezoning, inclusionary rezoning.
Yeah, I can help you with that. Yeah, good question, but I think it's being a little bit too technical about the words. We have a zoning ordinance that says that if we grant D variances, we shall include the requirement for affordable units in it. And that's a standard type of ordinance around New Jersey, both based on COA principles and fair share housing settlements, fair share housing centers settlements. And so, although it's not a change in zoning to grant a D variance, when the D variance is granted with a requirement to have affordable as a component of the units, that meets the criteria for settlements and for COA and for Marlboro, and so it's something to worry about.
In layman's
I wouldn't
terms,
get all bent and shaped by it.
inclusionary rezoning does include granting a deed variance subdivision.
It's a better way to look at it is-
But it's the court,
Better way to
the
look
court
at
recognize it.
it. Not only does the court recognize it, but our zoning ordinance recognizes it and sort of requires it. And that's not just us, that's throughout New Jersey. So it's,
Okay.
I hate to be specific to,
Right,
you know,
but it's-
but that's sort of how, it's hard to.
It was alarming when I.
There's a lot of things about
That's fine.
Marlboro that are very kind of technical and, but they're pretty standard.
Well, thank you for sorting that out. So we're still looking at some.
28 affordable, and you don't technically have to build them, you have to
Plan.
plan and provide the opportunity for them.
Good.
Unless we said we would build them, which is not what we said.
This will be holding. Thank you.
Not you.
No,
That's it?
nope.
Oh, come on, you could do better than that.
That's what I was.
Just kidding, no. Thank you, Brian.
Cal, excuse me, Cal.
Yes,
I'd like to just thank Mr. Haggerty for bringing those things to our attention, because it's detail that many times get lost in the shuffle, and I appreciate that, Mr. Haggerty.
I second that, Lou.
Sorry, both under land use and under education law. Although I'm a member of the Board of Education, I am not speaking on behalf of the Board of Education. Thanks.
Okay, that's disclosure.
anyone else from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that portion. I'll open it up to the board if anyone has anything on the board. Mayor? and-
So I received an email from Kathy Christie, who's been serving with this board for several years. It's an email directed to both Carol and to me. And it announced that Kathy, because of personal reasons, had to resign. And it was with great sadness that Carol and I accepted her resignation. She's been a terrific participant on this board and to the Bedminster community overall. And we certainly wish her the best and a quick and speedy recovery so that we can return her to her service for the township. So that it was not completely unexpected. The timing was not great, but not unexpected. And we know that Kathy, with her attention to detail and her love of having programmatic efforts to follow, that she will be very rigorous in her quest for better health.
You did a beautiful letter, Larry,
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you.
And I know it was well appreciated by her. I said similar comments and wish her good health, and I'm sure there'll be a place for her to serve in the future.
Exactly. Which, so the vacancy led to a discussion of, who else is out there contributing to township and to community. And someone that came to our attention because he was objecting to something that the township committee was considering. Mayor Parker and I were so impressed with his delivery and the thought in which he gave to the issue and presented it. And although we wholly disagreed with his ridiculous position and took action notwithstanding his objection, Steve and I were impressed and said, that guy he serves somewhere. Where can we put him? He was really good.
We should have him disagree with us more often.
Yeah. So Tim served on environmental committee, and this was the time when Colin was chair, and then it was also when Renee was chair as well, and then in a few short years, Tim Walter was chair of the environmental commission, and did an outstanding job on environmental, picking up what Colin had started and running programs and Moth Night and Bat Night and bringing in folks to come to this room to see presentations and really taking EC from reviewing applications and doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and actually making it more ingrained with the overall Bedminster community. And so, Tim, we thank you for that. And once again, that was recognized. And Tim's also participating with Bob Holtway and with Colin which really was a blue ribbon panel in looking at master plan issues. So Tim is well versed in having gone through the Bedminster master plan, making recommendations, sitting with Bob and probably finding, Bob didn't agree, well, didn't make it into your report. But now you get an opportunity that your comments will be heard, will be seen up there, both in video and audio. And so, Tim, we welcome your contribution to the Bedminster Land Use Board. So welcome.
Well, thank you. EC wasn't recorded, so I could make, flippant comments, and now I have to watch out what I say. I hadn't learned, the first time. I'm sad about the circumstances, but I'm glad to be part of this with you guys, so thank you.
Congratulations.
Good.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
Anyone else on the board? No. Okay. These two applications here, Bedminster Farms and Lamington River Farms, they're both no.
Have not been deemed complete.
They have
Nothing
not been
done.
deemed complete yet. They're
just
still pending. Okay.
And just to clarify, I know I asked this question of Paul, but that Bedminster Farms is a planning board matter, not a Board of Adjustment matter.
That is correct.
Okay?
Okay, and Elite, we want to,
Yes, Madam Chairman, there's a request to postpone it until March 12th at 7 p.m. And we're just going to have the record that the matter will be carried without additional notices to March 12th, 2020 at 7 p.m. That's a Elite Properties matter.
correct. And also is pending is, how do you say that? Ricolet?
Relocate.
Relocate. Yep. That's also pending. It's not been set.
And that one was deemed incomplete originally, and nothing new has been sent in, so it is.
Okay. Okay. So I guess we're ready now to hear what our two professionals have to say. Who wants to start?
Todd does.
I will,
Todd does.
It's a little bit complicated, but we have, and some of you may remember this, the Township of Bedminster obtained center designation and for two centers, Buckerman Village and Bedminster Village, and also something called plan endorsement from the State Planning Commission, which is the state agency that is responsible for the adoption of the state plan. And state plan is not a binding document or mandatory master plan for the whole state. It's advisory, and it's advisory to municipalities, advisory to other governmental agencies, and to the departments within the state. Been fairly inactive, the State Planning Commission been fairly inactive for the past 10 years or so, or 8 or 9 years. On the other hand, our centers exist, they are real, we see them every day, and our plan endorsement for the entire master plan is very, very important, very significant, because there aren't too many municipalities that obtain full plan endorsement. And to phrase you and Frank would be a good thing, because township, it's a rare thing to get plan endorsement. And but under that, we also still exist. We have similar zoning to the state planning at the time of endorsement, which I don't remember the exact date, but it was sometime probably around 2008 or something like that, or 2007. So, and the last state plan was I think adopted in, Frank, was it 2004 or 2003, the actual state plan by the State Planning Commission?
I think it was 2004, Tom.
A long time ago. So
What are you talking about? That was yesterday.
It's in planning, generally speaking, you try to plan 10-year increments. It's a good goal. For example, the municipal land use law says to try to re-examine your master plan every 10 years at a minimum, but you may re-examine it more often. And I don't want to give political commentary or anything about the state plan, but basically, through a series of actions, your centers and your endorsement were extended first in 2016. The centers are extended. Then in 2019, a rule was adopted to extend centers provided municipalities that were granted them endorsement start the process of petitioning the state for an extension of your centers and an extension of your endorsement. And Bedminster did that, we said, working with Larry and with Frank, sort of just basically telling them in writing that the township is interested in pursuing continuation of these center designations, two villages, and the plan endorsement.
Can I make a little observation just for everybody's frame of reference? Plan endorsement was basically something that Joe Metelsky beat the state up for until we could get those centers designated and get them to acknowledge that Bedminster's master plan was consistent with the state plan. State plan consistency was the reason we won, was one of the main reasons we won the Kirby case. We sort of lined up all the ducks in a row that way. And so when Tom's talking about extending our plan endorsement, there's really two parts to that. One is the continued finding that our plan is consistent with the objectives of the state plan. And the other part is that to whatever extent the state extends any kind of benefits, and maybe any number of types of benefits besides just technical assistance from state planning staff, our centers entitle you to get that benefit. So keeping your plan recognized by the state as being consistent with the state plan, and you're keeping the centers alive. And Tom has paid a lot of attention to making sure we didn't drop the ball on that. So we've submitted a whole bunch of materials back to the state to try to make sure that they know that, number one, we told them we still want to be designated, and number two, that we've proved that we have a right to be. And I'm sorry to cut you off there.
And these are like very big picture plans, so that so that there is a map of the whole state, which is the state plan, and it's, not too many people look at it except people like me and Frank and other people at the state apparently. But it matters. And so, and yes, and we are, in a, now we talk about let's try to have consistency between the master plan and the ordinances. Well, we have consistency between the master plan and the ordinance. We have consistency between the state plan, or I should put it this way, the state plan, as a result of your work, has consistency with your plan. And for example, through the work that you did, the R10 district is designated as environmentally sensitive under the state plan, as planning area 5, as opposed to planning area 4, which is 4A is agriculture and 4B is open space, basically. So 5 is the most protective area, so that happens to be consistent. The state plan happens to be consistent with what you require and have had for decades. So, and that's a big deal, and that is also, the lines are consistent, so that's a big deal. And that's why it helped in the challenges to the R10 as well. So we want to stay on course, and we're on course, but I wanted, Larry and I and Frank have been working together on this, but there's not a lot yet, but they're going to want us to meet with the state, and then they'll want us to stay in the pipeline for this. There's a concept of basically, there's a concept that you keep pursuing plan endorsement, and I think what will happen is the extension was until July 1st, 2020. I think that they will recognize that they need more time on their side to deal with these. I think there's about at least 50, but there might be 60 towns that are seeking some sort of towns or counties that are seeking some sort of designations of different varieties or endorsement. So it's good planning. It's you'll get involved a little bit, but it probably will take a lot of months, and it'll mean they're probably listening to some of the speakers at a recent conference. They have a very good planner, Donna Rendero, who's the executive director of the Office of Planning Advocacy, also now called the Business Action Center, I think. And they're getting their hands on this of what do they do now. And so one of the things that they'll probably do is say, and I can't be certain of this, and we're not guaranteed to this, but we're going to extend you, but we would like you to have a plan implementation agenda. And in planning language, that's sort of analogous to conditions of approval, so to speak, or conditions precedent to our approval. And it's all kind of amorphous, to tell you the truth. And you come up with a list of things that you try to be working on, and we don't know what that will be yet. But it might get. I think they want to try to work with municipalities more than in the past, and I think they want to try to work with counties. In fact, the Somerset County planner was at the conference too, and he was very interactive with Donna Rendero, and they're trying to look at it as, even though the regs are from 2008 and are pre-recession ancient planning regulations, different world, they're trying to figure out how do they work with towns and with counties and municipal and even state agencies to plan for the next 10 years. Now, on their side, they haven't updated their own plans, so it's kind of it's unusual, but that's typical of New Jersey. I mean, it will probably take 6 years to just even talk about it, that kind of thing. So, but that's good. It's good to plan. It's good for them to plan. It's good for them to be aware of your details. You got a lot of great stuff, and you hopefully will keep getting the same types of endorsements that you've got in the past, and reflecting that what the Bedminster want can be also what the state wants. And if it weren't, then we'd push back, you know, and part of it may be that they'll Frank made some good points. I mean, if you have an endorsement and you have centers, you theoretically are prioritized for funding for state grants and loans and things like infrastructure trust fund and road and bicycle ways and pathways and walkability and good things. And I don't know whether we've ever succeeded in such grants because of our extra points, but it doesn't hurt. And and we have tremendous. I don't know how Joe and the prior council committees were able to accomplish the tremendous bikeways you have, but that's maybe was related to being prioritized or being shovel ready and having points. So, and that just changes all the time. What does the DOT grant money for, but or what they don't grant money for, but that's just the idea of the state plan is to coordinate state expenditures with the plan. Whether that happens, I don't know. So, does anybody have any questions about it, or
So is this like our zones line up with their zones? Is that?
the way we look at it is they realign their things to work to respect our lines, and they might think the other way, but I'm right about it, so so just trust me. But on the other hand, if I act like we're all working together, well, that's sort of true. They're not that, the things we want are not that different than what the state plan initially indicated, and our endorsement reflects the details that we wanted. And kind
Of in sync.
they're very much in sync, and in a lot of other municipalities, there wasn't even a change to reflect the details that the municipality sought. So I hope that can still stay possible. I think they want it, the staff wants it to be that kind of cooperation. But obviously they're still getting their hands around this. It's going to be a lot of work. They recently hired 4 planners, and they have 4 new members of the State Planning Commission. I don't remember the persons, but they rarely met over the past 8 to 9 years. One of the few meetings was in 2016 to extend centers, which that happened, and we got the extension, and we will stay tuned and keep you informed and try to help you know of any key events or anything like that. Right now, we're probably going to get a meeting with the staff. Probably Larry or a committee member will go. It'll be sort of informational, introduction type meeting. They're scheduling those over the next couple of months. Okay?
Tom, would you say, and again, I apologize if I'm maybe not as versed in some things that maybe I should be, but conversation is a little obtuse for me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me just,
Sure.
for my own understanding, just confirm my understanding. So when they did this 2003 plan, that was a plan that created things like the Highland Zone and the various particular designations to different regions around the state, correct?
Well, that's a good question, but the answer is, to some extent, yes, but the Highlands Act wasn't adopted until 2004, which created a Highlands Council. So So the 2000,
But
that
separating
map,
the state into-
that's an example, that map,
Separating the state into
that map needs to be
regions was done in
updated.
2003 or only as a result of the Highlands Act?
Only as a result of the Highlands Act in 2004. After the state plan was adopted, the Highlands Council was created. And it took 2 years for the Highlands Council to create their regional master plan. And another whole thing to talk about.
And we are wholly in the Highlands District, correct?
No.
No.
Well, I'm sorry, you're right. We're in the Highlands region, and our conservation area is the portion of Bedminster north of Pottersville Road adjoining Chester. Our planning area is the area south of Pottersville Road, all of the rest of the township. But yet we have not opted in the planning area, and we are one of the few municipalities that is endorsed by the State Planning Commission. And our two centers are state-approved centers. So there's a lot of questions.
I want to make sure,
Yeah,
so far so good.
Right, and you're right, there are other sections, and what that map does, and it's not just a map, it's a state plan, it's a long report. Map by the State Planning Commission has 5 planning areas, they're called. Yes, urban centers, number 1, suburban areas, number 2, additional suburban areas, number 3, planning areas 4A and 4B, and then 5, and we primarily have, I think, 3 and 5, with centers at the 2 locations that their plan is consistent with what we wanted, and so our plan, so we're both okay. Highlands is different, and we didn't opt in the planning areas, so that's really complex too.
Okay, so my ultimate question is this: if we're looking for alignment or endorsement from the state for our plan, where are the opportunities where we kind of rub up against them, where there may be some inconsistencies or things that are our challenges going forward as we seek to even modify our plan?
Right.
Can you help me understand where those?
Those are good. That's a really great question, and that'll be the issue. That'll be the kind of thing we try to wrap our hands around.
But we know of none right now. Right now, we still are aligned with the state plan in such a direct way that if they say anything but yes, you can have your plan endorsed again, we should be surprised, because we did everything they said before. They didn't change the rules about how it works.
Okay, good.
And I would, in a large sense, I would think that, first of all, my attitude as a planner and as your attorney is, the 2 villages exist, and if you didn't extend them, it wouldn't make any sense, because they're not going to go away. They don't evaporate because you don't put them on paper as a center, okay, or as a village. They are villages. There are paper villages and paper centers that are in other towns that might be an issue, but I don't think that's really an issue here. So, but that's what we would dialogue about, and there might be little details like just DEP. Oh, I know one thing. Larry gave a great program last week about redevelopment, and one of the things he talked about was that an executive order, I think Larry said 100 or something like that, and basically the governor says, flooding is so important, Sandy was so bad, we got to do everything at the state level to deal with, be more resilient, to have resiliency, and to have flood protection. We have a critical need. So everybody in the state will have to deal with this. So State Planning Commission and the planners there are going to say to us, well, what are the resiliency things that Bedminster will do to make sure that the flood areas and potential flood areas are protected and are planned for and are whatever. And you can just, the details of this are just mind-numbing. We don't have that much flooding, but if we did, but we do have floodplains, and so we may have to look at the floodplain map and look at our floodplain ordinance, and we might call upon Paul to help us with any updates or things like that. But there's an example where because it's an executive order, it's really important, apparently, and it is, right? On the other hand, you're sort of that's not a big problem for you, I don't think. But it might mean that, in the plan implementation agenda I talked about before, this condition, the set of conditions that you'll do, it might be a condition that will review our floodplain management ordinance and our whatever ordinances about similar subjects, and we'll update them to current expectations and floodplains, and these things do get changed over time. So that's a really good example of a PIA condition that we can almost predict will happen, okay? And I don't know, there might be some things we want, and more that we in the county want, and we'll try to be working on that. It's sort of your work with their work, and just anticipate what the issues are, things like that. So to bring it down to a little more granular level, the two centers are Pluckman and Bedminster Village. And so I guess a question to Tom and Frank is, by having that designation, is there anything that, other than opportunity for planning studies and planning grants and maybe some other assistance from the state, is there any consistency in zoning in those two designated centers that the state would look at, or would they just look to Frank to give a report saying that in the designated centers, this is what makes them unique, this is how we zone to accommodate the characteristics of the center designation? Frank, that's a good one for you.
Tom was doing so good. What do you?
We're in great shape.
I don't think they're ever going to try to implicate rezonings on our part. The objective for the centers is really for them to be walkable, mixed-use places. And while our mixed uses in Pluckman tend to be residential up the hill and commercial down the hill, it's still a mixed-use village area. Things like getting the sidewalks extended further, or making things more walkable, or places where the state might say, if your plan implementation agenda calls for having sidewalks from Far Hills all the way to, that could be something that they might put in the plan. But they would also be looking for policy approaches where, if you were going to change things, if you didn't, for instance, permit mixed use, which you do, right now you permit residential and commercial uses in the village neighborhoods in both villages. You can do them on the same lot. You can't build apartments. You can put a residential unit in a building with a commercial or more than commercial use. So that part of our plan, they wouldn't say, well, you've got to allow mixed uses, because we already do. If they were interested in us doing something more aggressive, they'd probably be a lot more specific than saying you have to allow both of those things.
So maybe does, Rich, that address your concerns, so that it's not necessarily an overlay from the state saying you will do this because you have center designation, you must put this into your zoning.
Right.
It's a little more,
It's
sort of touchy-feely that we want this, though your centers should be walkable, they should promote this type of activity.
In order to get adopted, the state plan had to disavow being mandatory for any municipality, so it does not govern any of the only thing it ever governs is something that the mayor will agree to with them as part of what the town wants to happen with this plan implementation agenda. So they don't tell us what to do, but if they find that what we're doing is consistent with what they're trying to have done, that's very good for our planning process. And sometimes it'll be financially rewarding if they can help us with specific things we're trying to do, which is really what this all comes down to.
My thought, Larry, is that this is just in completely the broadest strokes.
Speak up, Rich, so we go.
When they make these plans, the intent is to foster further development within the centers, so as to preserve what is existing open spaces and protect our R10s and things like that. Just generally speaking. Yes,
That's a good way to put it. And
absolutely.
luckily
Generally
ours-
speaking.
Right, and luckily ours is so consistent with it that
So the only place we're going to rub up against trouble with them is if we try to either expand these centers into areas that are otherwise designated or perceived to be other priorities with respect to open space and R10s, et cetera, or by, I don't know, curtailing certain things within those centers.
That's a good way to look at it, although I would say that it's not so hard to tinker around the edges or to deal with special planning areas, special issues, like, but, so in other words, it's not like the lines are...
If we said we
totally-
wanted Bedminster Village or Pluckerman Village to extend across the state highways into, a little bit into the hinterland, the state plan would not tell us we can't do that. Your plan would tell us, we've always made a hard line there, we're not going there. And so that's our objective, and they find that to be perfect. But if you wanted to go a little further out there, they wouldn't say, no, you can't do that. They would look at what you wanted to do and try to limit the scope of it.
Right.
And just so you guys know, so while we were talking, so Colin and I have been looking at the state plan and their designations for Bedminster Village and Pluckerman.
One day we're going to get a big flash.
That's your home.
Colin is working on that.
Give me a month or
That's your homework.
That will be here soon enough. Don't worry, that's Colin's to-do list.
So, but I'll give you an example, like the county is gonna work with us on I don't know yet, the strategic growth or needs or reuse needs for big pet properties like the AT&T property or whatever we start planning for. And they also, the county doesn't want to tell you what to do, they want to work with you. So that might be something that's a little special planning to deal with, well, how to adapt the reuse of a building, or how do you deal with that in 2020 to 2030 with a totally changing economic climate. And those are and that was what you saw at Homedale was probably something that's of a special planning area. It doesn't fit neatly into a center. It wasn't a center. I'm sure that the state is not totally opposed to it because 150 acres of former Lucent property is being adaptively reused. So planning doesn't just like fit perfectly into some zone line, and you deal with that as you go forward. And so does the state. The state is not doing zoning, and they don't have that authority. The only true entities in New Jersey that actually regulate the uses of land are municipalities, the Highlands Commission, and the Hackensack, well, now it's called the Sports Exposition Authority, and just...
The Meadowlands.
Yeah.
The Meadowlands, and so, and that's still true. It's not quite home rule, but it's basically the only entities, even the Highlands Council does not zone or designate uses. Even in the preservation area, they regulate it, they prescribe, the statute prohibits and regulates, and the regulations prohibit and regulate, but they don't say the property has to be used, can only be used for commerce, or the property can only be used for residential. Basically, in the preservation area, you can't do anything except exceptions that are 18 or 19 exceptions in the statute, or get a permit. But, so why am I stressing this? It's just so you realize that as board members, and as you recommend ordinance changes to the governing body is the only body that determines the uses by a zoning ordinance, or by a, there are certain exceptions, like preemption by the state for solid waste facilities and for airports, things like that. But
And variances, right?
variances are yours.
Right, but that's another
That's a
mechanism.
different, but that's not zoning.
Right, but in
That's a
effect,
very important difference. Very important difference.
the end, you know, if our board grants a variance, in effect is rezoning, right?
No.
Okay, you don't call
Never.
it rezoning, but
Never,
you're allowing a
never,
use.
never, never,
But you're
never.
allowing a use that wasn't allowed, right?
That's a different subject, though.
Okay.
A D variance for use, or for any of the 6 D variances, is just a variance. It's a vent from the existing zoning code. The granting of a variance is a site-specific, fact-specific determination by the board, and that's true in every town in New Jersey. The board, in your case, a combined board, the board sitting as a zoning board, but in other towns, the zoning board is separately. Because only D variances can be granted by a zoning board. They can't be granted by a governing body. They can't be granted by a council or a committee. And this was very important. This was established in the Euclid case in the United States Supreme Court when they upheld zoning. The United States Supreme Court in 1926 or so said, and you could just imagine, before 26, zoning didn't exist. In the 1800s, there was no zoning. You could build a factory, you could build a tannery next to an apartment building. You could build, you know, DuPont next to 100 houses, right? No zoning. Like Houston today, sometimes you see a little
Yeah.
strange things. Okay, there's no zoning in Houston. There's still not yet some zoning, you know, potentially. So in 1926, the Supreme Court said, if you plan with a comprehensive plan and adopt an ordinance that's substantially consistent with that plan, through comprehensive planning, zoning is lawful. And you can prohibit a tannery next to the houses. And you can determine, you, the governing body, can determine the zones and the uses. It was a huge change, and one of the reasons why zoning was upheld was that the zoning ordinances included the right to obtain a use variance from a board, or in some cases from a board and a governing body. And the Supreme Court said that helps, that vent, there's another case as well that supported this theory, that vent from this set of lines on a map, which is a zoning ordinance, is something which makes this constitutional. Okay? So you have this incredible authority as board members to deal with use variances and other variances, and it's very important, but it's not the same thing as changing the zone. Only the governing body can change zones or zone ordinances, and zone map is an ordinance. It's one of the few things that's an ordinance.
So Tom,
Maps that's an ordinance.
So to George's point, though, when we grant if we were to ever grant a variance, that variance is granted to that applicant and that applicant only.
That's correct.
The conditions that we place on that application are for that application and that application only.
That's correct.
And that's the land.
And that piece of
The
land.
variance.
To take it a step further, though, my question is this: with respect to precedent, can a neighbor looking for a similar variance use the idea that the variance was granted over here for this, that, and the other thing? Again, no two cases are probably exactly alike, for sure, but can they use that precedent that a variance was granted here be an argument for a variance there?
No, in fact, the case law is very strong the opposite way, that the granting of one variance on one property is not precedent, cannot be precedent for the granting on another property. And precedent is irrelevant in variances in terms of the board's prior actions. Precedent in case law is important, except to the Supreme Court of the United States for some reason. So theoretically, they don't have to. They get
to write that they decide whether to overturn something, but, so, why is that? And the reason that is so is partially because a variance is, it's partly because in United States, real property is considered unique. One piece of real property is unique from any other piece of real property as a matter of property law. One of the reasons we allow people to do what's called specific performance, force someone to carry through on their contract for real estate if they signed a real estate contract. Specific performance is rarely the remedy, but it is in real property for certain parties in certain settings. So the granting relief for variance for particular property for particular reasons is for the property, and it runs with the land for that property. It doesn't attach to other properties, and so that's why, again, your authority as board members is very significant. You know, you decide C and D variances.
Tom, I'd like to just ask you a question to go off of Rich's statement. So if property A was granted a variance, and right down the street, property B wanted the same variance, property B didn't get a variance because property A got one, because it's a set of unique circumstances. If we as a board deny property B's application for a variance, does that open the township up for a lawsuit?
Well, not in and of itself. People sue people all the time for anything, and
Right.
including boards for granting things or denying things. The fact that there was another case does not enhance the applicant's or the objector's
If
case.
you denied something, it could be appealed.
You could grant something, it can be appealed.
There
Okay,
you
you can grant something with conditions, it can be. You can even deny something, and strangely, multiple parties will appeal. So precedent doesn't apply to variances now. But we all, I mean, to some extent, why? Because you do it for different reasons, and that's why when you see. Well, I hope you see that when we write resolutions and you work on them, we're focused on the facts of the particular case. We almost never say, this whole area needs this type of relief because it's got problems or something. That's not relevant, the whole area. The property is what's relevant. So you get into that. And that's why each case rests on its own facts, sometimes, and that's why we still care. We want to put enough in the resolution, even on the cases that are very simple, to justify their grants if they get one, or to justify their denial if they get one. But all this goes back to zoning, which is, the enabling legislation was in the 20s and 30s, and it was all new then, and since that time, about 100 years, the case law, New Jersey's case law in particular, elaborates on all this, and obviously there's arguments all over the place on different cases, but those are the general principles to be aware of. And when it comes to the State Planning Commission, just be aware that they don't tell you what to do, but they can try to influence you. Okay, that's what the way to look at it. And same, the Highlands Council is a regional agency. They are very important. They did adopt their regional master plan. We did opt in. We have some significant differences with them, but one example is they sort of promote clustering as a zoning tool. We don't promote clustering as a zoning tool. We prohibit clustering, but we do promote lot size averaging and resource management, constraints adjustments. So we think we're better than the Highlands Regional Master Plan for the planning area for the R10. and I don't really care what they think for you unless you say to me, let's go care what they think and let's do something about trying to convince them to do it our way. And that may change over time. That agency may realize, well, what's so bad about not having clustering? I think everybody's going to start realizing that transfer development rights is almost impossible to do, and that's promoted by both the state plan and by the Highlands Council. And it's a great idea, but it's really hard to physically, economically accomplish. Transfer development rights means one sending area is preserved and receives money from a bank or from the property owner in a receiving area to pay to develop more property in this receiving area. It's just really, it's a creative tool that is very hard to implement in real life, in real economic conditions. So, but that might be something that the state talks about in state planning commission jargon. Okay, so.
Anything else from the board? No? Okay, I guess we're going to move on to, Brian, what do you have to say about the county? Are you going to talk to us about the county yet?
I don't think we're at a point yet where we know what the county, you're talking about the Highlands grant that the county's going to be approaching us with?
Well, we've just talked about having updates on both the state and the county, so if there's nothing that you can report, then...
I can report that Walter Lane, who is the county planning director, advises that in the next couple of weeks, they will be engaging the consultant that will be performing a study, and this board will be consulted about whether or not what the county is doing with the Highlands grant is they're following up on their study that previously determined that they had certain areas that were priority development areas and priority preservation areas in the county. And one of those priority development areas was AT&T. And another area that they were looking at as a possible area for potential mixed uses in the future are in the villages. That's part of what they're going to look at. They'll come back to us with their observations, findings, and then the planning board will weigh in on whether you think those are policies you would want to advocate to the governing body, or if you say, that's very interesting, thank you, we like things the way they are. I mean, you have complete discretion about what to do with that, but it will offer the opportunity to look at some choices and think about what they might implicate. That's the next step.
And Frank, is it, in your opinion, what are the differences between, like getting recommendations from a study like that, and then a board like this just granting a variance, or maybe 2, 3 variances for apartments, say?
Well, let's put it this way. I think the courts have long said that having a planned solution is always preferable. And so if you hear things in the course of that study that make you think you would want to change your planning in some way, that might mean that those variances wouldn't be granted because you would have a plan for where apartments and those types of use might go. That would be your takeaway, and you would recommend to the governing body that they either do or don't make changes to the villages. But that's going to be, first and foremost, the planning board's finding and recommendation, and ultimately the governing body gets to decide if they do anything with it or not. So while having an outside consultant come in and a fresh set of eyes look at these questions may bring a different perspective to it that you don't expect, I don't think that'll be a disadvantage. I think it'll be a real advantage. I think because you all get to bat this around and really argue about what you believe in here, I think it's a good thing. I think we'll all end up enriched by the opportunity. And if we make changes, they'll be because they're good changes. And if we don't, and ideally, the worst thing that would be for the planning board to have one set of feelings about those policies and the governing body to feel the opposite way. But I suspect, since that's never really happened here before, that we work through this. If both groups work through this, I suspect we'll come up with some interesting observations and maybe recommendations. But I don't want to prejudge any of that. I don't think anybody does. Yeah, a planned solution is always better than variances, but if there weren't the need for variances, you guys wouldn't sit here and grant them. I mean, the law is there for that reason, so. That's all I have, Chairman.
Okay. Anything more for Frank?
Oh, and one other thing. Brian does a very good job of taking a ribbing from me on a regular basis, and I just think we should mention that he's a good sport, you know?
Broad shoulders.
He's a pain, but he's a good sport.
All right.
Frank? We've before you on the, our ag plan that needs to be updated every 10 years,
Yes.
and it's due now. I know we've reached out to...
I think my brother's working on that already, but if he
Let us
hasn't,
know?
I'll make sure he let me know.
We'd love to know how much it costs and how long it will take, so...
How much and not long.
Good!
Look for the right answer. Look for the right answer.
We've done it a few times before, you know? It's not going to change.
Isn't everything?
Thank you, Frank.
No, thank you.
All right, I guess we need a motion to adjourn. Is there anything else, Janine? Yeah?
There is none.
There or not, we're going to have a committee meeting after this, subcommittee meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Seconded.
Okay. All right, ladies and gents.
I'm not-